And so, it's like, well, we know what the people who were living here referred to: the sun, Temet, and,
Mm.
water, Paul, and the moon, Muil, and even a bear, right? The California grizzly bear that lived in the area, which is Hunut. So it's like, oh, wow, we can connect the words of the people living here to this exact location.
I'm Damian Bacich. Welcome to California Frontier. Eric, this is cool. Since we talked the last time, and the first time, I've been really looking forward to this. We had a great conversation, and it was Marie Christine Dugan who put us in touch, who I just interviewed a little while ago. So yeah, we talked, found out that we had a lot in common, and that you've done some really cool things. You've got a lot of similar interests in early California, and yeah, so maybe you can tell us a little bit about, your background, what got you into this whole history of early California. I know you're in Southern California. You're down near San Juan Capistrano, right?
That's right. Yeah, grew up in Orange County, and well, thank you, Damien. I as well, looking forward to this, and love your podcast. You've had wonderful guests on, and CaliforniaFrontier.net. Love the articles on there. So I'm a big fan. Likewise, yeah, grew up in Orange County, and in the urban sprawl, there are a lot of hills around that I would go hiking through and go exploring through, even as a kid, and found would stumble upon morteros, which are the grinding rocks, where the people who were living here prior to Spanish colonization were grinding acorns and seeds and pigments. And so that was immediately what kind of got me interested in, well, who were these people? And then you get into fourth grade, and we have the obligatory field trip to Mission San Juan Capistrano, and that connected those two stories. So from there, I've always had an interest in early California. And then pursuing that, I started collecting books on it, and reading more and more about it. And then I got connected into the local historical society. And through them, I became friends with a historian named Phil Brigandy, who's a big deal in Orange County and had done a lot of stuff in the era that I was interested in. And so with him, we just started researching things together. And, all of that research started with articles about local interests, things like Richard Henry Dana. He very famously threw hides off the top of this cliff at what is now Dana Point, which is the little port that Mission San Juan Capistrano used. It's right, it's just a couple of miles down the canyon. And so
Hey,
it's like,
wait,
well, where was,
sorry,
yeah,
before you just remind everybody who Richard Henry Dana was.
yeah, Richard Henry Dana, who famously wrote 2 years before the Mast. He was a author, very famous author, and that book was published in about 1840, and it became a really big deal. And what it was that he had taken a trip on a trade ship all the way around the tip of South America to California, and he was from Boston. And so very few Americans had been to California at that point. So when he gets to California, his descriptions really become the first kind of popular descriptions in the United States of what is California. And although he wrote the book with the intention of illuminating the kind of the strife of the common seaman, the guy who's working out there and it's a hard life, and he's trying to change things for the better, what really made the book popular were his descriptions of this far off place, right, in California that at that point was a part of Mexico. And those descriptions really kind of made, the imaginations of people in and around Boston and in the United States at the time, really fire off of what is this place that's California. It had this mystique. And what he was doing here was he was on a trade ship that was collecting hides, which were, the former missions at that point. They had just been secularized, and the ranchos, they are raising cattle, and then those hides were, really the main trade item that was coming out of Alta California, coming out of California at the time. those were being taken back to Boston, and they were being used in the manufacture of clothing items, things like shoes, and they were being used on the mills that were there. So this was, this was the raw source of the leather and the material that was being used to create these kinds of goods back in the United States. So
California
Dana's book
banknotes.
becomes California banknotes. That's exactly right. And so Dana's book becomes famous. This is the 1840s, right? This is, within 10 years, California becomes a part of the United States. And so, this is kind of him, 10 years of publishing of the book. So I always think like, well, what did this have to contribute to, people in the United States' perception of what California was? And so Dana is a big deal, right? He's a big deal around where I grew up. Dana Point's named after him. And so it was like, well, where did the story take place? And that story took place on a big cliff at Dana Point that other historians had said, oh, when they made the harbor where the boats are, they ended up getting rid of the cliff. Well, I set out to find out where that cliff was, and it turns out that it's still there. And so I'm happy to report. And in doing that research, discovered all sorts of cool things, because what it started to tie together was early American historians, and they're working for the government, doing geodetic surveys, that kind of stuff. They were talking with the locals, and they were going, well, where exactly were the goods made or coming from Mission San Juan Capistrano being embarked on ships that went all around the world? And they could say, well, here's where that was happening. And so I was able to determine where that cliff was. And that's just a little kind of article, but then through that, the ball starts rolling. And so I did a bunch of different various little articles, and the next big project that I worked with my friend Phil Brigandy on was on the Portola expedition, the first overland Spanish expedition through Alta California, through today's California. And this was the Spanish, the first attempt to really settle what is now California. And so they passed through this region. And the story of that passage is really interesting, because you have this meeting of two very different peoples, right? You have the Portola expedition itself, which is made up of all sorts of people come from Baja California and come from Mexico, which at the time was, colony of Spain. And they're coming into where I live, and they're interacting with the people of the surrounding villages. And this kind of first point of contact, a lot could be gleaned from that. So we co-authored a book together that's just regional, the Portola expedition in Orange County. And then we did like a bus tour where we actually stopped at some of these locations, and some of those locations were really cool. One of them is it's now a region, it's a park, and the park was the location of a village called A La Una, and that was a rest day. And so you can go to this place where this village was, and you can sit there with the diaries from the expedition. And they climb a hill that's right there, and you can climb up to the top of that hill. And the reason they did so is they only had sailing guides, right? For the ships, the trade ships, the Manila galleons coming back from Asia would just sail down the coast of California. That was really all they knew about California at the time, was what these sailors had to write about. And so they went to the top of this hill to go, well, where are the islands that we know about? Kind of getting their bearings. And you can climb to the top of the hill, and a small vocabulary was taken there at the site. And so it's like, well, we know what the people who were living here referred to: the sun, Temet, and water, Paul, and the moon, Muil, and even a bear, right? The California grizzly bear that lived in the area, which is Hunut. So it's like, oh wow, we can connect the words of the people living here to this exact location. So we visited there, and then we went all the way up the county, because the expedition was traveling north from San Diego up to Monterey, and stumbled upon San Francisco while doing so. But so we did that book, and then I continued to write a whole bunch of articles, got to meet all sorts of great people. And the next project was another book that I wrote on my own, which was started as a result of seeing our mutual friends and acquaintances, Doctors Rosemary Beebe and Dr. Bob Sankovitz, who wrote a biography on Junipero Serra, and it's a wonderful piece of work. And so they were doing a talk at Mission San Juan Capistrano. I went. It's on YouTube. You can watch the very talk. And in it, Bob says, you know, the greatest kind of discovery in doing all of this is that we have the sources left by the colonists, the Spanish colonists. And that's really what historians have had to work with. But during the talk, he says, through those sources, you can dig out the voice of the people who were living here prior to colonization. So that set me on a course to at first write an article about using Sarah as an anchorage point to tell the story of the beginnings of where I live, which is now Orange County, but really it's Mission San Juan Capistrano. So I just published that book, and it's Saint Junipero Serra and the founding of Mission San Juan Capistrano in Orange County. And through that process, once again, it just you keep running into more scholars who are doing all sorts of different things, and so that takes me into new territories, and that's how I got connected with Dr. Marie Dugan, and how I got connected to another scholar who's working on missionary from Mission San Juan Capistrano, David Rex Galindo, who's another wonderful scholar. So now I'm connected to all this great group of people, and so the rabbit hole just keeps going deeper. So right now I have that book out, doing a bunch of talks at the mission, and I'm working on other projects as well. So that was a long-winded answer, but that's my kind of story up till now.
That's awesome. I mean, well, first, there are a lot of questions that come out of that. First of all, how do you keep, what do you do for a living, by the way?
I know, believe it or not, I teach math.
Oh, wow.
I teach middle school math, but I also I've taught social studies too, so I have both credentials. But then I also do like computer programming for our district, and
Oh, wow. Okay.
yeah, all sorts of other things. I used to do programming and work in sound design and all sorts of different things. But I just love this stuff, and it's so anytime I can make for it, I do. And my lovely wife is very supportive.
Yeah, supportive wives are really important for this
You know
kind
what I'm
of
talking
work.
about.
Exactly. Yeah. Hey, so I was looking at your website, and where you have a lot of information about what you've done and the work you did with Phil.
Yep.
And there's a great story in there about sort of when you were, I want to say, what, in seventh grade, and
Yeah.
you sort of, there was a book that sort of set your imagination on fire. Can you talk a little bit about that? I thought that was a really cool story.
Absolutely. Yeah. So this interest in hiking and going around all of the local canyons up in the Santa Ana Mountains, which are really the mountain range that is kind of the source of all of the waterways that go through Mission San Juan Capistrano, and to some extent Mission San Luis Rey. And so I was constantly exploring all of those, and there was a hiking book that was, somebody had given to me saying, "Hey, read through this, and you'll find more places to go." And looking at the bibliography, I found this reference to a book that had been published in 1931, and it was called "Shadows of Old Saddleback." And the big, huge mountain that's the top of the Santa Ana Mountains that's around here is called Old Saddleback. I mean, it's actually comprised of two peaks: Santiago Peak, named during the Portola expedition, really, and another peak, the Majeska Peak. And so I was like, well, where can I find this book? And it was just not available. You can't find it. And at that time, this is, the internet was a new thing. And, it was just impossible to find. Finally found a local library that had it, and it was behind glass. It was one of these, like, we don't really want to let you handle this. So I had to go with my mom, and she was really supportive. And, she was, so I got to actually read through it. And then after that, it's like, well, I got to get this. And then there's old rare bookstore had a copy, and I'd saved up money just to buy it. It was like $125 book, kind of thing. But it was great because it was the guy who wrote it, Terry E. Stevenson. He was he wrote for the local paper in Santa Ana here in Orange County, and so he loved this stuff the same as I do. And he would write about, hey, I'm going to talk with the old timers, the people who have, oral histories he would collect, and he would go through the archives. And he kind of went from being a newspaper man, and you see throughout the things that he publishes, he really becomes an historian. And so that book tells the stories of all of the canyons, the shadow of Old Saddleback being the canyons that are in its shadow. And in doing so, just really does a great job. It's very much period writing. He's writing his, a lot of this was written in the 1920s. But the way he's writing about it is exactly the way that I feel about those places today. And now I've turned on, so many of my friends and people I know, you guys got to read this. And, they're into hiking and everything. And it's like, you can't be, it's impossible not to be interested, because he's talking about this very corner in the canyon, right? And this rock, and, you can go to the top of that rock and they're morteros, right? And, and then okay, this trail must have been here to connect to this next village, the next canyon over. And now you're walking and trying to figure out where that is. So that really got me interested in it. That was one of the books that really, set off the imagination. And then I met other people who were like-minded.
So you went and bought the book. That's great.
I got it. I still got it. It's on the shelf behind me. I have books all over my house, but I keep, those books, they are, precious to me, and I have that exact copy sitting on the top shelf, and subsequently, it's like all of the books that he's published, I've gotten a hold of. And now, when I'm going through, friends who have archives of material, it's like he has his original, people have his original writings, and so that's fun too, because now you're connecting with this part, that I grew up with, and it's like, oh wow, and then you get to know him, and all history is just full of rabbit holes.
Yeah, it is. They're fun, and I liked what you were saying about reading that book and then connecting the different trails and the landmarks on the trails. And I've always kind of felt that, here living in California, and I'm sure it's the same way in other places, that when you kind of know, you get a peek into the local history, it's almost like wearing the VR goggle, or what are the augmented AR goggles,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Right. Or Pokemon Go or whatever, where
Yeah.
you're looking at the landscape, but you're also, there's like an overlay of, oh, this happened here, and this is connected to that. And so it really adds another dimension to being out in nature, to a whole another dimension of interest to what you're looking at, because already the landscape is interesting, it's beautiful, and being outdoors is great. But then if there's this other layer of, but there are people here, right? And this happened here, and this was connected to a village or to a ranch or to, it's so much more interesting. And I think we in California, for example, we're a state of transplants for the most part, even, and so it's oftentimes takes a little bit of effort to understand where you are and what's going on, right? So yeah, I really like that story. Tell me a little bit more about Phil. Like I said, I was on your website and reading. He seemed like a really fascinating person. Talk a little bit about him.
Absolutely. Yeah. Phil was a really good friend and was my mentor in all of this. So Phil wrote 20 some books on local history. He was, born and raised in Orange County, and had a real love of this stuff. And he, like me, was interested in hiking and going out and finding all of these places. And he'd been doing it for a lot longer than I had. He's been everywhere. But he was really, really knowledgeable, and I mean deeply knowledgeable. And going into his house was like going into a library. It was just chock full of books. And so I had read Phil's stuff for years prior to meeting him, because anybody who's reading about local stuff knows Phil. And Phil was also a speaker. He was constantly out speaking. He published 2 books through the University of Oklahoma Press. So he was a really serious guy, but he was not in academia. He was a guy who was outside of it, and he just adored it and did it for the true love of it. And so when I first met him, I had interest in a famous bandit named Juan Flores, who was down here, part of a group called Las Manias, the Handcuffs. And in 1857, well, he'd actually been sent to San Quentin prison in 1855. escaped in 1856 and, was leading kind of a group of robbers that came down to Los Angeles, and were in Mission San Juan Capistrano. Famous murder took place, and this led to, the murder of the sheriff of Los Angeles. It was this big story, and I've written so much on it, but I haven't published on it yet, but I will. And so I had been researching that story, and there were so many things that I didn't know about how to do research. It's like I knew how to go to libraries, I knew how to ask for things, but somebody who was really connected with, you should look at this or you should look at that. And so I kind of I went to an Orange County Historical Society meeting where I knew he'd be speaking. It was like author's night. And so I meet Phil, and just in, talking with him about what I already knew about this event, he immediately grasped on like, hey, I know a lot about this and we should talk. And next time I see him, he has about a stack this high of books where he's like, you should take these and you should read through these. And here's some places that you should look. And this is the Bancroft Library, which I'd never even heard of, right, at that point. And, you should go there, and here are the sources that you should consult when you're there. And here's all the newspapers that exist. It's like, that's where I first learned about the Los Angeles Star, which was kind of the main newspaper in Los Angeles at that time.
Huh.
And so he really sent me off on the path of how to do research. From there, while he's doing 50 other projects, we would just collaborate on things. And he helped me so much on every single article that I wrote in that early period on Dana. And he helped me on all of the stuff that I wrote on Portola, all the stuff that I'm writing on Mission San Juan Capistrano. And when I started my most recent book, he was already giving me a lot of pointers about how to go about that. We then had we were working with Doctors Rosemary Beebe and Bob Sankovitz, and we wrote up a book proposal to take our Portola project, which was which was regionally focused, and take it the entire way, discuss the entire expedition, everything that led up to it, and its whole entire trek up and down California twice, or 1.5 times. Anyways, we got the proposal done, and we were up at the Mission Santa Barbara Archive Library doing a whole bunch of research there. I was translating some documents, which I'm getting better and better at with the help of all these wonderful scholars. And Phil and I are working together. We got back, we had the proposal, and unfortunately he died. Mm-hmm. He had a heart attack. And so that project, I'm trying to do on my own. And fortunately, I have everything that I've learned from Phil, but, I'm still, developing as a scholar, working in all these things. And the debt I owe to him is just huge, because this was a guy who, he used to say to me, there are hoarders and there are sharers in the historian world. And he goes, be a sharer, be somebody who goes out there, and when you find things, share it, put that out there, talk with other people, show them, hey, here's what I found. And all of the people who I've already mentioned in this discussion, all of them have been like that. They've all been like, I'll help you with that. Hey, I found this thing, Dr. Marie Dugan, she's in Mexico City. She goes, oh, I found some of the invoices for goods for Mission San Juan Capistrano. And, without any, she went the extra mile. She had an assistant help her, scan them and send them to me,
Wow.
And that's just, so Phil really instilled that in me. And he was an awesome historian. He's got his website that's still maintained, it's still up on Orange County History Land. OC
okay,
History
yeah.
Land.
Make sure you give that to me later, and I'll put it on the notes below.
Very cool. Yeah, so awesome historian. He got me into all of this, and I owe pretty much everything I've done so far to him. And he was the one who got me introduced to Bob and Rosemary, and he was the one who was connecting. We had a great dinner with them up in San Jose.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah, so he was great. And we did a bunch of research trips to the Bancroft Library together, and just to really help. He taught me the ropes.
Yeah. It's really funny that finding a mentor or mentors is so huge, right? Because they're like, I remember at the beginning of the Iraq War, Donald Rumsfeld talking about unknown unknowns.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
don't know what you don't know, and you need somebody to point it out to you, and to put you on the path, and to pull out threads that you might not have ever found. And I remember, the thing you said about sharers and hoarders is super important too. I remember when I was in grad school, there were always some people who felt that, like, if you shared resources or books or articles you found or whatever, that somehow you're going to be losing your competitive advantage, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that always seemed weird to me, because I always figured, well, you know what? I'm here because somebody else helped me, so I may as well help them. And you find, I mean, like, you're mentioning people who are at the height of their, game, and they're just helping and helping and helping, and getting more people involved, and finding new people to pull in. I mean, I mean, I'm talking to you because
Yeah,
uh,
because of the same.
Marie Dugan. So have you met Eric Plunkett? So I mean, it's so important, and it's also more fun too, right? When you find a
Oh,
community of people that are interested in the same thing, that are
oh,
yeah.
absolutely. I mean, I was, as I continue to learn how to translate documents, Rosemary Beebe was just like, anytime you need help, you send me things. And, I got out of the Bancroft Library because Phil taught me how to do that. I got a bunch of reports, military reports, following the founding of Mission San Juan Capistrano, related to things that were going on. One of those had to do with, the one time that Sarah, and Palu's biography, that he's afraid for his life. It happened right here in Orange County near Mission San Juan Capistrano. And so I had the report in Spanish, and parts of it had been translated in various places. And so Phil helped me get that report out of the archive at the Bancroft. Dr. Rosemary Beebe then goes, let me help you translate it. She translates it, right?
Wow.
And so, now I have, because of these two, I was able to tell that story way better than it could have ever been told. It's like, you're absolutely right. And that's the whole point, is that scholarship is a team effort. And everything that I have written, it's funny because it feels like team written. It's like, I have all of these people who are constantly helping me out, and you get connected to all sorts of different individuals. People who are into geology, people into anthropology, people who are into plants and animals, and all these kinds of things, and all of that gets thrown in because it's all part of the story. So yeah, Dave, I couldn't agree more. And that's one of the great funs of all of this, is that I run in a lot of circles. I've worked a lot of different kinds of careers, and teaching is similar, and it's great. I love my job, but the community of historians that I've been connected to, who are into this early California stuff, are some of the just most gracious, helpful people I've ever been connected with. And they, yeah, everybody I've met is a sharer. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know, it's a great community of people. And then, like you said, the thing that comes out of this, right? The end goal is that you have, you learn about the stories of people that really do help you understand everything today. It helps you understand yourself, understand the context of your community and the place that you grew up in. It's To me, it's an exercise in understanding connections, and how compromises, and how groups can actually find a way, diverse groups can find a way to make a community that can actually thrive. And it's not always a pretty story, but ultimately the same kinds of things that we're engaged in as scholars are the kinds of things that you find in these communities. And it's like, there were people in those communities trying to make it work too. And so
Right.
that I love that idea. I'm a part of it.
Stay tuned for part 2 of my interview with Eric Plunkett.